I like your fox, Sarah. I love foxes. We have one right now in the yard visiting in the morning. I love foxes.
Great, thank
Yes,
you.
it is. Yeah, no, it's not the Atkins Street mangy one.
All right, it is 7 o'clock. I'm going to call us to order and invite everyone to join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Meg. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Kim. Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Is there a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Meg. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Sarah. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Audience of citizens. Do we have anybody with us in person or online who wishes to address the board?
Doesn't look like anyone online here.
All right, thank you. We'll move along. Next up, we have our Portland Public Schools Spotlight, and we are delighted to welcome the Bridge Program from Brownstone Intermediate School, and we have our principal here to introduce them.
Good evening, everyone. Dr. Britton, board members, thank you again for including us. So we are highlighting the Bridge Program, and it's one of our specialized programs here in Portland. It's an interesting program because while it's housed at Brownstone, it actually supports and works directly with all K-6 students who need it. And the reason that's important to remember is because right now we're made up of Gildersleeve and Brownstone students. So our case manager, our school psychologists, our paras are not just working with and supported by me, they are working with and being supported by Tracy Graff at Gildersleeve. They have worked with and have been supported by Ryan Walsh from the Valley View and continue to work with and are supported by Sarah. Now, the reason that we chose to highlight a program that on paper technically only works with a small portion of our student population is because, and you guys will see this, it's because the work that they do and the compassion with which they do it and the impacts that they have made on students and will continue to make on students is absolutely something that is worth being highlighted. So tonight, we are lucky enough to not only be joined by staff, we are also joined by current and former students and current and former parents. So I'm going to hand it over to our school psychologist, Kelsey Lisk, and our case manager, Alicia Holloway, so that they can go into some more detail about the impacts and the accomplishments that they have had and will continue to have.
Hello, board members. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kelsey Lisk, and I'm a school psychologist. I began my career in special education in 2008 after helping a child with autism be able to say the word granola correctly. But this isn't about me. Okay, a little bit more about me just to transition. In 2020, as the world was shutting down, I was completing my internship and hoping that the world would reopen in the fall and that I would have a job. Through a connection, I heard about a position in Portland. They were starting a program, and my eclectic resume seemed to fit the role perfectly. We began the Bridge program with Megan Campbell as a special ed teacher, Sarah McLaughlin as our BCBA, and myself as the clinician. We only had 4 students initially, and they were each in different grades with different needs and challenging behaviors. We quickly became a family, and we watched our students grow, progress, and graduate. After a year, Alicia Holloway was brought in as our special education teacher, and at the same time, our program grew. We have students across elementary schools in Portland and collaborate with teachers at each school. We have also been able to work closely with admin and staff across the district, including the middle school, high school extension of our program, the Harbor program. Many students who enter quote-unquote behavior programs do not have good odds of getting out. Even with the challenges of supporting students across town, we have seen almost all of our students increase their time back with their peers and decrease the support needed in our Bridge program. The students in our program are published authors. They have written 2 books about my dog, and they're working on a 3rd. They're over there. We celebrate every year by having a reading of the book in our library where students are able to invite friends and family, including peers from across the school. We've had staff from across the schools in Portland come. We also have an end of year ceremony where our students get awards. We get to remember the school year and again, invite friends and family. Through the years, we've often had ancillary students who aren't official, but benefit from kind of hanging around our program. The staff remain in our program and are incredibly impressive humans. I truly love being a part of this community and school system. I could not be more proud of our students and the work we do in our Bridge program. I also want to recognize the parents because we could not do what we do without them, especially our honorary room mom, Britt Davis. So now Alicia Holloway has some words as well.
Hi, I'm Alicia Holloway. I'm the special education teacher in the Bridge program. I started my special education career in Portland in 2019 as a resource teacher at BIS, but I was also a paraprofessional at Valley View for a few years, and I even started my career here in Portland as a student teacher in Jackie Scoville's 4th grade classroom. So while I've enjoyed all of my positions in Portland, I'm most proud of the work that we've done in the Bridge program. As Kelsey mentioned, we've read statistics about students in behavior programs, some saying as many as 80% of students in those programs never leave them. Dr. Russell Berkeley, a specialist in ADHD, explained it this way. Friends forgive your distractibility, your forgetfulness, your working memory problems, and even your restlessness. They will not forgive your anger, your hostility, the quickness with which you emote to other people because it's offensive and it's socially costly. My goal for our Bridge students is to provide a safe space for them to work through these difficulties while still maintaining their dignity. Our students feel strongly and deeply. They benefit from the support of our program to build and practice the skills they need to access their general education classes. And man, have our students worked incredibly hard to do that. These kids have joined their classes for field trips, written persuasive essays, participated in book clubs, made presentations for their classes, and are now thriving at Brownstone. I'm so proud of them. I could speak all night about how I've watched our students grow in age, in confidence, in abilities, in strength, and perseverance, but I think it's better to hear it straight from some of them. So if we can pull up we had the students, some of them are 5th graders, talk about their favorite things about the program, what they wish other people would know about the program. Where we started with an awesome video from Max, who's here tonight. Don't look at him, don't hand the camera to him. And then I'll read the rest.
Talking about the Bridge program has helped me, and my favorite part about it. So first, the Bridge program has helped me a lot with anger, a lot of other stuff like that. My favorite part about it has to just be the amazing people in it. For example, Miss Holloway, Bunch, Quittier, Anthony, Emily, Miss Lisk, everybody else that's in the Bridge program. They're amazing. I really appreciate them. They've helped me out a lot, especially the adults. Miss Mia, Miss S. So thanks to them, I can handle my anger a lot better. Bridge program, I would say, if you're having problems with like anger, other stuff, problems with that, I would definitely recommend it. Yeah. Bye-bye.
This isn't the first video Max has made for the Bridge program. He's also made wonderful videos reflecting on The Wild Robot and the other books that we read in our book club. He's an amazing videographer and editor, so hope to see more from him. So then we also have one from Anthony, who's also a 5th grader in our program, and it says the Bridge program has helped me build my perseverance. My favorite part of the Bridge program is learning math, and I wish others knew that I am proud to be in the Bridge program. And then another of our 5th graders wrote, the Bridge program is great. It's helped me a lot with my social skills. I've learned strategies that will help me through hard times. Being a part of the Bridge program has helped me to succeed in school and make friends. Lastly, I would like to thank all of our dedicated staff members who have poured their heart and souls into our students every day. Thank you, Nicole Schrenker, Lindsay Kazicki, Mia Raffa, Melissa Tierney, Kayla Comesso, and Eric Fritz. Some have just joined us, and some have been with us almost since the beginning, and we wouldn't have done all of these great things without them. So we'd like to bring up another, one of our parents, Britt Davis, who would also like to speak about the Bridge Program. Like we said, she's our honorary room mom, and she makes really great, she has a great bakery. So.
She does. Oh, I feel really short like this, but is it fine? Yeah, I don't want to touch it and break stuff. So I wasn't really, like, I didn't want to come with, like, notes or anything, so I thought, with Max's permission, I would just tell you Max's story. So I grew up here. I've lived here my entire life. I graduated from here. Both sides of my family are from Portland. We're big Portland people. So Max started in one of the preschools, not Valley View, and immediately struggled. It was phone calls every day. He threw blocks. He's yelling. He's upset. And he would never physically hurt someone, but, you know, the frustration would get out on the blocks and then someone would get hurt. So they kindly told us he was not welcomed back. Thankfully, Portland school system stepped in, met with us. They came out, they observed him there. They didn't really see too much of a concern, but they welcomed him in with open arms to the Valley View preschool program. He thrived. He did wonderful. When it was time to start kindergarten, we went way back downhill again. A lot of frustration, yelling, anger, couldn't focus, having a hard time, basically just getting through his day. When first grade rolled around, the school system came to me and said, hey, we're starting this program. It's called Bridges. We were very hesitant. We were very scared. First day, he tells me that a little girl was very mean to him, and I went full mama bear, and it was you. And I went full, like, oh my God, he's in there with this 5th grader, and like, what are they doing? I was like all upset the first day. Miss Lisk and Meg Campbell at the time called me and like talked me off the ledge because I was like, I don't want this. And I'm so glad that they did, because it has been like life-changing. He gets social skills, he gets life skills, he gets time with Miss Lisk to learn about his feelings and group therapy. She on multiple occasions worked with his prescribing physician because he was on medication, and then he's decided not to take it anymore. So she's worked with him. She's spoken to his doctors. He's really just had this. It's completely different. I don't know how else to really describe it other than he comes home happy. He comes home proud of the work that he's done. He enjoys going to school, even though he'll grumble in the morning and tell me, but that's more so like, you know, no one wants to get out of the house in the morning. But he's made so many friends. And like, when I tell you friends, I mean like deep, deep friendships, to the point now where I'm friends with those parents. I'm friends with the paras. Like they said, I love to come in and bring treats and celebrate with them and get to know the kids myself and spend time with them. To the point where his twin sister Taylor now, like, she'll go join him on different occasions there, or when they have their author parties, she's always like, I can't wait to go, I can't wait to see everybody. And now that they're all at Brownstone together, she's actually telling me at recess she's hanging out with the kids in his program. And the transition for Max has been seamless. It's like he was never separated from his class. His social skills have kept up. And he's just in such a better place where his grades are phenomenal. He really does amazing, amazing work. He's testing off the charts from what I've seen, even though he won't admit it. And he's a whole different kid. And I think if this program hadn't have been here, I worry about, I hear about outplacement and things like that, and I know sometimes it helps, but I would love for more parents to be aware of this program and know that it's an option and know that, like, the impact it can have, because Max was one of the kids first day when it started. He was there and he's still there. And it's so beneficial to this community, and I think it's wonderful that we've taken the time to establish this, and it's doing such wonderful things for Portland, and I just really wanted to to come up and speak about that, because I don't think it gets enough recognition, and I think we've done a really good job of including those kids that just need some extra support. So that's all I had. So thank you.
That's all about.
Thank you.
So I mentioned we had some original students. This is Sophia Plord, one of them. She was the student. She's no very good friends. Now they're very good friends, as you can see from the pictures over there. She's no longer in Portland Public Schools, but she does go to school in my district because she's living with us now, and we're in the process of adopting her. But we met through the Bridge program. So let's hear what Soph has to say about her experience.
Hi, my name is Sophia Plord. I'm 14, and I was a Bridge student from 2020 to 2022. During that time in my life, my home life would always be changing a lot, so I considered the Bridge program as another family. The staff would always help us any way they could. They would teach us how to deal with our trauma and students we didn't get along with, or just anything in general. We always ended up making up in the end. The teachers would do almost anything for us, including the school psychologist, Miss Lisk, who is now my foster mother and who is going to be adopting me. Well, being in Bridge, she helped me learn to talk about things that were hard for me to process and were hard to talk about. Now I feel as if she knows everything about me, and now it's really easier to talk to people about what I've experienced. Now that I'm living there, I feel as I have peace in life, and I'm finally happy. I'm extremely grateful for what every single Bridge staff member has done for us, and I'm also super grateful for all the future memories I will have with them. They would always try to make learning as fun as they could by making games or activities, like we would do scavenger hunts or theme projects. Every Friday we would have Fun Friday, and that was probably my favorite. Mm-hmm. And at the end of that day, that was our class reward for the week, whether it was making food or playing a game. Overall, being in Bridge has really affected me in a good way, even if while I was there I didn't think so. Thank you.
I'd like to welcome Kelly Lemke up. She's another parent of one of our students who's graduated.
Hello, my name is Kelly. My son Cameron is in the Bridges program, or was in Bridges. He's now an 8th grader at Portland Middle School. He transitioned from Bridge to Harbor program, so I'll just give you a little synopsis of his journey. So he joined Bridge program the first year it was initiated. During the summer going into 4th grade, we received a phone call from Mr. Wallstrom stating they were instituting a program for students with social emotional issues. Cameron had social emotional issues from a very young age. He had big emotions that didn't necessarily fit the problem. He couldn't control his actions, reactions to situations. Processing situations was a hard task, and when triggered, he would go from 0 to 100 in less than 5 seconds. It could take anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes for him to calm down at any time and reflect on the situation. So impulsiveness was a huge part of his journey. He could be violent, he could slam doors, he could flip furniture, he could basically do anything because he was so angry at that time. And he had no control over his emotional state. In school, he would have long meltdowns, and mostly triggered by other students who weren't following the rules or listening, which had absolutely nothing to do with him, but he couldn't handle that situation. So he was not able to make or keep friends from a very young age. And no one understood him. So even if something was done by accident, that wasn't a word in his vocabulary. So everything was done purposefully to him. So and he would just get upset. His severe reactions cost him friends. So when we first heard about the development of Bridge, we got really excited. He would start his day at Gildersleeve and be there till about lunchtime, and then he would bus over to Brownstone and spend the rest of the day there with the Bridge staff. He had support with learning and developing coping skills, self-reflection, strategies to prevent his huge emotions from making an appearance. Bridge program was a safe space. They understood him. And they always encouraged him when he would get upset in class to excuse himself and go down so that he could prevent himself from having a meltdown. And they would go reflect on the situation. Sorry, I have no idea where I am. And this would help him to prevent him from continuing to have these huge meltdowns. So throughout the 3 years he spent in Bridges, he went from taking about 30 to 60 minutes to calm down from an episode to just mere minutes. And he learned to always take responsibility for his actions. He has no problem apologizing to anyone and everyone. He has to. He has no problem taking the consequences. And he just grew so incredibly much over those 3 years. And he transitioned into Harbor program at the middle school and basically was told that he doesn't need to be there, but they would never kick him out. So he prefers to be there for the extra support. But if it wasn't for the phenomenal staff that they have and the communications between family and staff and school, we would not be where we are today. We can't give them enough credit for where he is at this moment. So he is phenomenal. He's thriving. He's testing well. He's an honor roll student. So yeah, just super proud of him, and I couldn't be more thankful for the Bridge program. So yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for bearing with us. Our last speaker is Cameron Capico.
Hello, my name is Cameron Capico, and I'm 12 years old. I feel like the Bridges program helped me, like, develop as a person, because they were very mindful of my anger issues, my trouble focusing in class and everything like that, and they were like very supportive, and they had a system where they would like give me little prizes which motivated me to do good so I could win these little prizes, and they handled my situations very well. Whenever I would get upset or angry or have a meltdown, Mrs. Lisk and Mrs. Holloway would always put me in Mrs. Lisk's room, and I would calm down. We would talk in there, and I would reflect on what happened, and they definitely changed and shaped me as a person. I would not be able to do the things that I'm able to do if I didn't have them.
Nice.
All right, so as always, awesome to hear from the kids. Awesome to hear from the combination of kids and parents and staff. So if you guys have any questions, I might not be the best person to answer because you can see that our staff is pretty incredible, but feel free to ask them.
Are there any questions?
Just quickly, how many kids do you have presently, and how many kids have you graduated to the next program or out of the program?
So we've graduated, there was one student who graduated before Cam, and there's Cam last year that we had 3 graduate and move on to the Harbor program.
Sophie's class, I think we had 2 or 3.
Oh yeah, Sophia's class we had 2 or 3.
Yeah.
So probably about 10 we've graduated. And then currently we have
10.
10.
10, okay.
It ebbs and flows throughout the year, and we've gotten students mid-year, we've had diagnostic placements. Again, we've had students increase, decrease time in the program. They all have very individualized schedules, you know, spending various amounts of time in gen ed or in our program for support.
We have some that are completely self-contained and some who, you know, access us as needed. It's very individualized.
And just talk a little bit briefly about what would happen if this program did not exist. Where would these kids go?
They wouldn't be in their community.
Okay, they'd be
Again,
outplaced?
I drove up to the school the other day and I messaged Britt. I said, I just drove up and saw Max out in front of the school talking with a bunch of his peers. And, you know, they would get to school early just to kind of hang out in front and hang out with their peers, and that's not something you could do if you weren't in our district. So I think it is super important to keep these kids in the district and have the supports right down the hall. It is challenging being down the street. We get texts and have to run down the street, but
That'd
it's,
be the only,
that's our biggest
Our biggest
challenge.
challenge is between buildings, but.
We do really enjoy being, you know, having our fifth graders now. They've become, we call them the bigs now. They were the littles and now they're the bigs, you know, getting close to graduation, so.
It sounds like it would be helpful to have everybody in one place.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, well, sorry.
Thank you so much for coming and presenting, and thank you to the families and the kids who came in and shared with us as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you guys are amazing.
Yeah, it was just a pleasure and really a privilege to get to hear your stories and to have you share your personal stories. It was really encouraging to hear what has happened, and I think it's just wonderful that our district has this program. So thank you for sharing that with us tonight. Thank you.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's what it's all about.
Thank you all, and please don't feel like you need to stay.
Yeah,
You
that's
may
right.
you may
Okay.
scoot out if you need to get on with your evening. But- All right, thank you all so much. We're gonna move on to our student representative report. Happy to have you both with us this evening.
Yeah.
That's all
They said
right.
the highest party.
I needed that segue, but it seemed like,
This week's Student Senate is working hard to ensure that the first ever homecoming is successful, as this event will be hosting over 200 students. This is roughly 50 students higher than we had last year for Snowball.
nice.
Even though homecoming is not a holiday dance, we're still continuing our 20-year-old tradition of a toy drive for the Portland Food Bank. And toys will be collected at the door as normal. And just because we're not a holiday dance doesn't mean we're gonna stop doing it anytime soon.
What's the date?
It's this Saturday, the 19th.
And is it here in the school?
Yep, it's in the cafeteria. Shoreline Music Festival had its conclusion last Thursday, where students performed the pieces of music they have been working on. We would like to congratulate all students involved for their outstanding effort.
Do you know how many kids were in it from Portland?
About 10.
About 10? Nice. Congratulations.
In terms of sports, this Thursday, the cross-country team is attending their shoreline competition at Hannahasset State Park. Both girls and boys varsity and junior varsity will be competing. Girls soccer, cross-country, and volleyball have all had their respective senior nights, and tomorrow boys soccer will be hosting their senior night at their home game. Also on Thursday, AP Gov and Writing Center students will be traveling to Brownstone to work with the fifth grade students on their Good Governor campaigns. This program, which has run since before I was in fifth grade, is based upon the democratic process and allows for elementary students to engage in their community. This process involves selecting an issue, crafting a campaign, presenting, and lastly voting within the school and state bodies to elect an overall governor for the state of Connecticut. The high school students will be helping the fifth graders to revise and review their campaigns. And lastly, PSATs are being held this week. Juniors will be taking the test tomorrow, and the freshmen will be taking it on Thursday.
Did you say which grades are going to help with the Kid Governor campaign?
So AP Gov is juniors or seniors, typically juniors, and then Writing Center is juniors and seniors.
Is that new this year? I didn't.
So the Kid Governor isn't, but I think
No, not kidding over.
Yeah,
The partnership with high school students coming to
Yeah, I
mentor.
just learned about it a couple weeks ago. So.
I don't remember hearing about that in the past, and what a great idea.
Yeah.
Are you going to participate in that? Okay,
We leave early, but there are a bunch of students that are going.
that's great. Very cool. Anything else for us? Any questions for our reps? Nope. Thank you both. All right, we'll move on to communications and updates. Dr. Britton?
Okay, so included in your packet, a few things for your consideration or information. First, unfortunately, we have received a letter of resignation from Chelsea Anselmo. Some of you may know her better as Chelsea Giegrich. She has taken a position in Groton to be closer to home. Looking forward to exit interviewing her, although I know exactly what she's going to say, but she will be deeply missed. She's a reading teacher at Gildersleeve this year. In the past, she's been a teacher at both Gildersleeve and Valley View. Awesome human being, amazing teacher. Wish her all the best of luck, and very sorry to see her go. Okay, I did include, just reference it, because it's included in the communication section, but I think we'll probably talk about it a little bit more in when we get to the old business. Rebecca did respond in writing with our request for information about whether it is an obligation of the board to approve both policy and regulation or just policy. So I did include that there, and it did involve board bylaw, I think it was 9112?
9313.
9313, thank you. So
And 9311, but specifically 9313.
So we did include both of those there. The short answer is that the board's obligation extends to approving policy, not regulation. The board would be approving regulation if it is required by law or requested by the superintendent. So I just wanted to include that because it is a written communication that Rebecca gave us. It's in your communication section, but I think we can talk about it further when we get to the consideration of policy under old business. That sound good, or would you prefer to talk about it now? I'm not sure.
Whatever your preference is, it's fine.
Why don't we wait and
can
talk about
save
it in the
That's
context
fine.
of the policy, because I know that's when it came up. All right, I did include a letter that we got Saturday. I thought it was a really thoughtful letter from Sarah Elliott Caratasios. right? Caratasios. And Sarah, the reason that you got it separate is because.
I just noticed the next page, yep.
Yeah, the return receipt came back. You and Kim, for some reason, that your email was wrong, so I just forwarded it to you separately, because I think that they had you as like a .org instead of a .us on your extension, so you weren't looped into the full one. But I did want to make sure that you got that. I thought Sarah's letter was pretty spot on. I mean, she's clearly has some insight into the costs associated with outplacements and all of our desire to keep as many students in-house as we can. I thought that was also a perfect letter to get on the heels of the presentation that you saw tonight. I did reply to Sarah, and I did kind of outline for her. I said, my short answer to your question is yes, and in some cases, mission accomplished. Now we have farther to go, but I did outline for her all of the in-house programs that I'm very proud of we've built over the past 8 years, and the positions that we have in place that are supporting those programs, many of which she outlined in her letter. There are always going to be some cases where we do have to outplace students, and I did explain to her that a large part of the deficit that was caused last year was a function really of two things. One, the decrease in the state aid that we didn't expect from the equalized cost sharing grant, but also when students arrive in district and are in outplacements, our obligation is that we continue to provide those outplacements. So that's kind of what caught us last year by surprise, with several students who moved in and a decrease in state aid. But I did, respond to Sarah, and I included you on that response so you could see it, and then Sarah did respond back to me. Now, what's interesting, and Sarah and I do want to talk at some point about this, but likely we'll go through Personnel Committee. One of the things she points out is the cost for OT and PT. And Sarah and I have been talking about, currently that's a contracted service. We may be reaching a point where it might make more fiscal sense to bring it in-house, but that's always the kind of balance, right? We have to figure out what the needs are, and then whether the cost benefit exists to continue to have it as a contracted service or to hire it in-house. I won't steal Sarah's thunder, but we have been looking at that closely and may be prepared to make some recommendations on that. But again, that was something that I thought Sarah was pretty insightful. She picked right up on in her letter. So any questions about Sarah's original communication, my response, or her response to my response? No. Okay.
Did you include her response to your response?
We got it all, we all got it. Did you all guys all
Yeah,
get it?
but
Because-
I'm kind of late this afternoon.
I'll forward it to you because I think that you're at sarahspear.org and not .us and Kim. So, yeah, I'll forward it over to you because we had, but most of you got it except for those two. So I'll send that along to you. Also included in here, Mike Pelton has asked the town's ethics committee to take a look, and actually he's sort of self-reporting is the way I can describe it. There were some concerns raised that he would like the ethics committee to address and give a decision on. I share that with you because it does involve Board of Education, right? There was as you know, 24-hour fundraiser that he ran, and I think some of you may have walked in it, right? And just to remind everybody that you heard about fundraisers tonight. We do no lack of fundraisers. I know coming in, Dylan just told me we did a bake sale and it was very successful. We sell mums. We do fundraisers all the time. Some of those are in-house by our clubs and activities, and we have a process for those to be approved, and we have a very clear process that involves accounting for those funds and how they're both accounts receivable and accounts payable to support T-shirts and activities and all types of different things. Then, of course, we have some groups that are not directly part of the school, but are connected to the school, like PTOs and sideliners and music booster clubs. They often work with our blessing. We're aware of them, and a lot of our students participate in those, and our students directly benefit from those. In Mike's case, he did a fundraiser, the all-night walkathon on the new track, and those funds were appropriately, I believe, I have no reason to not believe, accounted for, deposited, and are now being used to support activities sponsored by the Sideliners Group. So I did share with you his communication, and in it were some of those editorials or things that raised some questions, but primarily because it did involve at least a tangentially connected thing to the Board of Education. I wanted to share it with you. And also, I just have to go on record saying thank you to everybody who does fundraisers. I hate that this would be an example of no good deed going unpunished, right? But we benefit mightily from these types of fundraisers because they support the activities our students enjoy that aren't otherwise supported in our LEA budget. So I thought you'd like to take a look at that. I can answer questions as best I can. I don't know when the ethics committee is going to meet or how they're going to deliberate on this, but since it was connected to board activities, I thought you'd like to see that. Questions? Okay. All right, a couple other ones then. I saw a letter, I was CC'd on a letter. It went to Ryan and Tracy from the Connecticut State Department of Education. And if you haven't seen that email, I think you should take a look. It reflects on how, at the end of the 2020-2021 school year, Gildersleeve was identified as a focus school based on student performance in high-needs mathematics. As you know, we received the SIG grant, and that SIG grant provided some support to Gildersleeve that then moved them not just out of focus status, but to become a school of distinction. What you see in that letter there is the State Department of Education recognizing and commending Ryan and Tracy and the entire staff at faculty for accomplishing that. I think it's a real tribute to Ryan's leadership and Tracy's leadership, and frankly, the entire faculty and staff who work so hard at Gildersleeve. I'm very proud of them. It was nice to see that letter and that acknowledgement, and I know you wanted to see it, so I included it in communications.
Yeah, it's glowing.
It's glowing? Yes, it is. We like that.
Deserved.
Yeah, very well deserved.
I also included Don Brecklin, who's a math teacher, teaches right across the hall over here, received the kind of letter that teachers get that keep you going, right? And it was from a former student who recognized and reached out to Don. Don was a teacher at Amity High School at the same time I was the principal. That's how I first got to know Don. And I do remember the student by name. We had over 1,800 students at Amity, so I don't remember him specifically. But Don shared that letter with me. It was from a former Amity student who is now a math teacher, and that student reflected on how Mr. Brecklin's instruction not only inspired him to be a successful math student, but a successful person and go into education to become a math teacher. To me, I read that letter and I was like, yeah, that's what we do. Like that is what it's all about. And I asked Don if I could share that with you, and he said, of course. He just wanted to make sure that I said to you clearly, while the letter references Don, you can just insert the name of any teacher in Portland there, and that's what we do. So I thought you'd like to see that. It really is a tribute. I know that means a lot to teachers, and we all have one. Like, we can all think of that teacher that inspired and turned it all on for us. And every now and then, when folks many years later reach back out and reflect on that, it's meaningful beyond words. So congratulations to Don, and thank you to that student who sent that letter. And I thought it was a very nice tribute, not only to Mr. Brecklin, but to our profession.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I have is a congratulations to you all, right? So you have been recognized by CABE as a board of distinction, and you will be recognized again, this is year 2, at the CABE Leadership, it's in November, coming right up, correct?
Yeah.
So I included that communication from the Connecticut Association of Boards of Education. They couldn't have picked a better board, of course, if you ask me. I agree with them entirely. You are worthy of that designation. You're a remarkable board. Thank you for all of your support, and congratulations on that recognition.
Thank you.
That's all I have for you.
All right.
I was trying to find the note from Michael, but what are the next steps with Michael Felton's request for ethics? Who exactly will review it, and then what will they deliver some type of findings? How does that work?
I'm hoping somebody can answer that question better than I can.
He asked for an advisory ruling, it looks like, and from that, and the Ethics Commission meets later this month, and it's a commission of, I believe, 5 members, and they will look at the evidence and issue an advisory
And is
ruling.
that group part of the board, the committee on the board, or who?
It's a town commission.
It's a town, oh, okay.
It's a town commission.
So even though he's reporting it to the Board of Ed or to the superintendent, it goes back to the town? And that's what I'm.
His request for an advisory ruling was to the Ethics Commission. Because they're a town board, they circulated their agenda and supporting information, and the Board of Ed was on the list of the town departments who, I think all the town departments received that correspondence.
Okay.
So Charles was sharing it with us because it's tangentially related to us.
Okay. Thank you
But
for
I
the
imagine
clarification.
they will at some point issue a ruling, and that will be communicated out as well.
You'll follow up with that?
As soon as I hear,
it.
I'll share that back to you. It's all public information, and I think I guess I respect Mike for doing it. I mean, good for him.
He typically has nothing to hide, so.
Yeah, thank you. Were there any other questions?
Amy?
No?
No.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. All right, then we'll move on to our Assistant to the Superintendent for Business and Financial Affairs.
So I have the quarterly financial report, but before, if there's any questions on that, we received last week, I apologize that there's nothing uploaded, but I don't know if you remember last year, we received the para-educator subsidy program. The state put it out to help offset some expenses for our paras, and they had another round of it. So we got the money on Friday.
That's great.
So they don't even know yet about it. Charles has to send an email out tomorrow. They give us a whole document to send. And so depending on what kind of coverage you have, they give a certain allotment to put into their HSA accounts. So it helps help them with some of the expenses. So this is the second year of it. I don't know if it's going to continue on, but we received $36,757.87, and that's based off of a survey that they sent out, and we had to say how many paras we had, who takes what coverage, what the cost is, and then that's how they divvy up the amount of money.
So that'll be spread out with all the paras that we have?
You know, the ones who take benefits.
The one who takes benefits, okay.
Yep. So I just wanted to share that.
That's great, thank you for the update.
Did we apply for that, or did it just come?
You just attest that you want to be a part of it, and then they see how many people, I don't know why you wouldn't apply for it, or put in for it, but then they see how many people put in, and then they take the allotted money and split it up that way. I'm sure every district gets something different, because everybody's got different structures for how they do their HSAs. So, but I believe they opened it up also to districts that have HRAs also, because last year they did not. So I think the funding was larger than last year, so they were able to give it to others as well.
Okay.
So.
Well, it's great that they've continued that.
Yep. And then my quarterly report, we're 1/3 of the way done of the school year. As Charles always says, if we're around 75% in our line items, we're doing well. That, you know, you will see some that are under, but those are the accounts that we kind of spend up front more so than throughout the year. As for example, temporary payroll, we only have 35%, but a majority of that is ESY, which happens in the summertime. So that, of course, so that's why when you add it all together, we're at about 66.4% left, as opposed to 75. But as of right now, from what I can see, we are doing well. We're doing well on all the accounts. You know, you'll see some negatives, which I tried to explain in the narrative, just how I grouped them together and how the deficits and surpluses are. And if anybody has any questions, I can try and answer.
I have a question about, you know, and we've talked about this in years past. I've brought it up a number of times, and I've always gotten pushback that it's, you know, the board doesn't transfer money during the fiscal year. But when you look at our policy, it does require that when we have an overage in an account and we're in a deficit in another account, if the money is necessary to be moved, that the superintendent is required to come to the board and bring that to us. Unless it's an emergency, the superintendent can do it on his or her own and then get approval later. But the policy is clear on that, and yet, and it's not often that we've seen this, but you identifying in here clearly that, you know, we do have a shortage in one account, and we anticipate a clear overage in another account because of the changes in transportation. So why wouldn't we seek to be in compliance with the board?
I don't know if the policy is, if it states at what point in time, because we do transfers if you don't.
It says quarterly.
So if you remember, in around December after we have our audit is when I do the transfers for the previous year. So we can't end in a negative, obviously.
Right.
So that's why
Right.
it's done that way, and why I'm assuming we don't do it quarterly, because then what happens if transportation then blows up and then we have to put the money back there? So I think it's more the ins and the outs. I don't have a clear answer to that.
And I don't expect you to, frankly, because I know you take direction from the superintendent for that. So, and I guess, so my question would go back.
I have my own little internal transfer process that I do just to keep track of it. But, you know, like on some, you can clearly see, like in the equipment line for the van, you know,
So
that's
I
the
would,
negative.
you know, pose to Charles in your oversight is, you know, policy 3160. That, you know, and again, this is not new territory, and I brought this up when Philip was superintendent, and I brought it up here. But it's just so clear that when there's a need to transfer funding, it's done, the superintendent makes that proposal to the board, and the board would then act on it, and the transfer would be made, and again, it would allow you to, in an emergency, in between, to go ahead and make those kinds of transfers. But I just don't understand why we continue to just ignore that policy as a board. We've allowed it to, you know, I know that, you know, Angel's new on board, it's not come, I don't know if we've ever brought it up with Kim or with Sarah. I've kind of allowed it to go along, and unfortunately, Stephanie, your narrative, which was fabulous, and you gave us the details we need, it clears right out here that we don't do transfers within the year. Yet our policy is absolutely clear that that we should be doing transfers in each quarter, depending on where we are budget-wise. You know, we shouldn't be ignoring our policies, and we're going to have other discussions tonight about our policies and what we do and don't do, and regulations, and it's, as a almost, you know, over 9-year board member, we've consistently not followed that. And I'd just like to call out again and say it's wrong, and we're violating it, and it should be corrected.
Well, thanks for raising that, Tim, because you're right, we haven't talked about this in many years.
It's been a few years.
It's been a while. So I guess my question is, because I'm trying to remember the last time this came up, because it was years back. Is this practice a function of being in alignment with how the town does their accounting? And so we are operating this way because the town doesn't do mid-year transfers.
Correct.
So that was like my vague memory.
Yes.
But and I guess, could you tell us a little bit more, like what would it, maybe this isn't a question to answer right now, maybe we need to do a little more thinking about it, but my question is, what would it mean if we tried to operate in a way that was different than how the town is handling their transfers.
I can't give you an answer for that right
Yeah.
now, but I can in the future, once
Okay.
I
Think about it.
do some talking.
That's great. And maybe touch base with Tom and Charles, and because maybe, I mean, you're absolutely right, that if we're not in alignment with our policies, that's not how we want to be operating, so.
And we never have been.
Right, and so then if this is something we need to look further into, let's look further into it, and, you know, we can figure out whether this is a practice that needs to continue for a very clear reason, in which case maybe we want to look at that policy.
I would suggest, and Tricia's sitting over here, for our next policy committee meeting, why don't we put policy 3160 on the agenda and take a look at it? I mean,
I'm all in favor
I have to
of
look at
that.
the town charter, because
But the town
that's-
charter-
it's something,
Yeah, can we
it's something.
start there with?
It's something that is preventing us from being able to. But to your
Okay.
point, if it's one of our policies, I don't know what overrides what.
Okay.
Right.
Well, maybe let's start by getting clarity around, you know, why we're functioning
What
this
you do.
way,
Right.
and what the rationale is, and what our parameters are in terms of your accounting. Is that?
I know within a department, for instance, when I had the library, I could move money. I would call Giselle, who's the bookkeeper or whatever. She would move money from one place to another because I was over in the books and under in resources or whatever. But to go from transportation to insurance or from,
It's
you know,
different within a location,
Right,
within a school,
right,
because you
right.
stay within your budget,
Right.
and that's fine. But when
Right.
you clearly are moving money from transportation to equipment and classified salaries to certified salaries,
Right.
and, you know.
that it does get complicated. But it is worth looking at, I agree. If it says we
Right,
should
you
do
know,
it, we should do it.
Yeah, the categories are laid out on there, and if it turns out that transfer is unnecessary, then that's an answer, but I don't believe that's the case with these particular numbers.
I will look
All
into
right.
it.
It sounds like we have some good next steps to look further into that.
Yeah.
and I think the policy committee would be a great place
Yeah.
to, you know, take a look at the town's practices, why they are the way they are, town charter, and other things, and make a decision about whether we need to amend that policy to reflect current
Exactly.
practice or adjust current practice to reflect the policy.
And there may be some state legislation that affects how this is done as well.
Well, I don't think that's the case, but I would be shocked if there was a town charter issue with the board. I mean, this is, you know, and that's what the policy contemplates, is that if we made a change in a line item as a result of a need to transfer, it would go to the town board of selectmen, and they would be made aware of it. And I would be shocked if there was something that would literally block that if we needed to.
Well, why don't we let Stephanie do some research?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe put it on for December.
I had one question related to your narrative, which I really appreciate. So it sounds like on the last paragraph, around tuition, on the first page, or the last paragraph on the first page, that we've seen some positive impacts to the budget since last year, but then you're also projecting a small deficit. And I wondered if you, or maybe Sarah, could speak to what accounts for the small deficit. Is it the excess, or the reimbursement rate?
So, when Dawn did the budget, she did it at the 70.4, so I'm sticking to that. We got 69 last year, so,
Gotcha.
and, you know, so I wanna stick to what she budgeted with. From the time when we did the budget, fast forward all what happened last year, then fast forward to the summer where we brought back, 3-4 kids from outplacement back to district. Some of the kids that came within the middle of the year were left, didn't have the, changed needs. But then there were a few other that, so again, net maybe of 2 students, but the cost of 2 of the ones that were very high cost came back to district. So, and we didn't know that last year. So that was a huge part of it. And small deficit also, remember our threshold is $90,000, and that was last year. And so most likely that will also go up for this year, because that's what you subtract off of the total cost. So looking at, which is also a plus, a lot of our services to the outplacements don't meet the threshold. So we're not getting any excess cost back. So I have one, it's $89,000. We're $1,000 off from getting excess cost, but that's great because the costs have gone down. So that's why, it's not a huge deficit, it's like I said, a small one as of right now, as to where we are in this place, but that's really the main factors is high cost ones came back, a few more went out that weren't as much, and or we haven't met the threshold, so we're not getting as much excess cost, or any excess cost back, where we may have in the past because they had more services.
Yeah, I was just trying to figure out why we have a potential small deficit. It seems like we're trending in the right direction.
We definitely are trending in the right direction, especially with the transportation piece was huge.
Yeah, and Sarah's report comes right after, so.
I don't want to steal her thunder.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions for Stephanie about the quarterly report? Nope. All right, thank you very much, Stephanie. All right, we are going to move on to our Director of Student Services. We have Sarah with us this evening. Hello.
Exhaustively through it. I'll just give an overview of each section, just a couple areas to highlight, and then pause if you have any questions on the specific one. So as Steph mentioned, as far as our placements go, we're at the same 20 we were as of September. So keep in mind some of that number, that is the number of students we know that are slated for outplacement. So some of the fluctuation in the budget is, for example, when students are awaiting a placement, they're on homebound tutoring, those bills haven't hit, so to speak. So our number reflects the total number of students that, are pending outplacement or currently in an outplacement. So that number will wax and wane. So right now we are at 20. So that's, a piece of the fluctuation is some we're waiting on exactly what their placement will be, what those bills will look like, et cetera. But we're still at the 20 that we knew we were at in September. One area I wanted to highlight as far as our numbers, our multilingual students, I'm going to start reporting it a little more, I don't know if accurate is the right word, but Julie has shared when a multilingual learner exits and is shown that they're proficient in English, they have to be monitored for 4 years. So I wanted to report in her numbers the total. So previously it was just reported active ML students. She is giving me the monitor number. So we have 49 students who are multilingual learners in Portland, 16 who have graduated, so to speak, and are still under monitoring. So just to kind of accurately capture, her time. One other area that I wanted to highlight for you all is McKinney-Vento. So that is our homeless population. Since 2021, I pulled our numbers. In 2021 to 2022, we had 3 students who qualified for supports under McKinney-Vento. This year, currently, we're at 14. We were 9 as of last year. So we are seeing that being, an increasing population within Portland of students who are becoming unhoused for whatever reason. That does incur, a cost of transportation, for example, or other services and support that they need. So just something to know about that. Another piece that Steph and I have been working hard on is kind of adjusting our billing for our Hartford students. So we receive the rates that Craig bills, that Hartford bills, that other surrounding districts bill. So for example, what's your rate for a paraprofessional, for a psychiatric assessment, for special education, whatever their rates are, we wanted to bring our rates in line with what kind of the market rate was, just to make sure that we're staying current. So that is also, I would believe, a net positive impact on the budget. We're making sure that we're billing commensurate with what our peers are building, some of the things that we switched around the way that we bill and just brought ourselves in line a little more. Any questions on, our enrollment and those couple department updates?
Sarah, can I ask when was the last time that those numbers were adjusted or reevaluated? Do you know, Stephanie?
The billing?
Mm-hmm.
So we've gradually each year kind of changed our process because it's grown so much. When I first got here, we only had maybe 4 students that had special ed services.
Okay.
And so then as the population grew, we tried to see what worked best for us and for Hartford. But when reaching out to all my CASBO people, I said, how do you guys bill for any kind of open choice or ACEs or whatever? And they basically say they take what CREC charges them and turns around and bills them the same thing. Okay. So I took comparables like for say we hire a 1-to-1 para for a student. I took what a single would take, a 2-person or a family and a waiver, and I netted, I did an average of it, and it came to $40.38. Correct charges $40.17. So it aligns right up perfectly to what they're charging. So I don't feel like we're overbilling. We definitely have been underbilling, I believe. So by doing this, and again, we checked all the balances of everything to make sure we weren't anything astronomical compared to what everybody else was, and it all kind of lined up. So to answer your question, it's kind of been an ongoing process. Hopefully now this will make it, be more seamless, and, if I were to not be here, or if Sarah were to not be here, somebody would be able to just be like, okay, this is what we do, these are our rate sheets, they increase this much every year, and that's it.
And we were transparent. We sent out a letter to Hartford, just letting them know these are all of our rates. They send us a rate sheet, so our students who are at magnet schools and receive special ed or 504 services, we get a rate sheet from them. So it's a common practice. It's just something that didn't exist, but I do, as Steph said, believe we were underbilling a little bit, so we brought ourselves in line. They're very aware. We're going to send out a preliminary bill November 1 with kind of this is what we're projecting for your students, and then we will check in again later in the year if services change. And again, for open choice students, we're only able to bill over the $10,000 threshold. So it doesn't mean we're billing for every student who receives special education services over the $10,000 that we would get back. So I think that, again, will have a net positive impact, that we're just coming in line to market rate with things.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other outplacement related questions? Yep.
I just had a quick question about the McKinney-Vento.
Yep.
We were low single digits for many years, and now we're maybe double digits.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say this two ways. Number one, I think we got great programs here. Are we rigorously vetting and investigating these that people don't want to take advantage of that aspect of our district?
Yeah, so the legislation is interesting. So initially, the law is that we enroll any person without any paperwork who comes either as an unaccompanied minor or says, I am homeless and staying in Portland, for example, in a motel, doubled up in someone else's house on a couch in my car. So legally, we cannot, at the enrollment stage, do any of that. So typically, someone comes, they say, I just bought a house in Portland, they bring us their deed, they say I'm living here, or I have a rental agreement. With McKinney-Vento, the law is that we don't do that. We have to immediately enroll. Now, if we find, for example, that that information was not accurate, they're actually residing somewhere else, the two options that under McKinney-Vento families have is, one, it's your district of origin. So for example, let's say someone was living in Portland, they were evicted from their housing, they lost their housing, they're staying in Cromwell. The options would be either for them to remain in Portland, and we would have to continue, splitting the busing with Cromwell to get them here, or they could fully enroll in Cromwell. So it's school of origin or where you are staying, essentially. So if a person were to not meet either of those criteria for Portland, yes, that would be the case. But legally, we can't do that fact-finding until they're fully enrolled, and we'd have reason to believe that, if that makes sense. But I think that the population is growing significantly. When I talk to the state, McKinney-Vento expert, he says the average in the state is 1%. 14 is a tad over that, but we were under for a number of years. So, for us to be a very small municipality, me experiences that is interesting. It is a shift. But I think, what he had said to me is it's generally something that's growing across the state. Economy is tough on a lot of families.
It just feels strange the numbers are going up so significantly for a small district, that there's some underlying things happening.
Yeah, I could certainly look into it.
How often is it you that does the monitoring to see where the children's homes or where they're spending their evenings?
So no, I'm not an investigator. That would be cool. No, I'm not a private investigator,
well,
but I am.
Who does that? Or how does that work? I don't understand.
Yep, so how that would work, so let's say, for example, we had reason to believe that a family was not residing in Portland, was residing somewhere else. We would have our evidence to support that, whatever it be. We would have to give them the opportunity to have a hearing. So for example, let's say we felt family is not residing in Portland, we'd have to gather our evidence to say, these are all the things that we have to support that you don't live in Portland. We'd have to offer them a hearing before the Board of Education. We would review the evidence, the board would rule on that case, and then we would then be able to, say, your children are no longer enrolled here. But under McKinney-Vento and in generally with residency in Connecticut, there's always that option for a hearing. So it's kind of, we have the burden of proof, and they can also present their evidence. So they could come and present, no, this is a lease agreement I have, I'm staying here. But I do coordinate that for the McKinney-Vento piece, not necessarily for residency in general, but if there were ever a homeless case that rose to a residency hearing, that would be me that would handle that piece.
So it's just by chance that we
Yeah,
would hear that they're not here living here?
Like who would be, investigating if they are or aren't living there. Under a McKinney-Vento case, it would be me. I wouldn't be following someone in a car, but if we had information to believe that that was the case, I'd be the fact finder and gathering evidence. And I'll defer to Charles if we've ever, I know some districts have folks that really monitor residency really closely. I don't think it's been a need to do that here in Portland, is my understanding. But if it were McKinney-Vento, it would be me that's the gatherer of the evidence and would present it.
I mean, this is an area where we need to maybe focus
Since
more
we're seeing
attention or
such a
resources.
significant increase.
Yeah, so well, it's hard. We don't have a private investigator, right? I mean, it's complicated. It's not, I mean, I don't know that we're staking people's houses out or following them home. And we could go to that extreme. I mean, I imagine there might be districts that use an SRO or do that. I mean, but we talk to people. You know, we know our people. Our counselors know our kids. We know. And, in some cases, with McKinney-Vento, it's very complicated, right? I mean, these are complicated situations. And especially when the law says that, somebody shows up on your door and says, I'm homeless, you're enrolled, right? Now, beyond that, we do follow up. We are asking people for proof and for lease agreements and at least an understanding of where they may be. But sometimes it shows up, if somebody comes in and a couple weeks later is saying, well, I need a van to pick me up in this other town and bring me here. And we're saying, well, how's that? I mean, how then is that something that we're responsible for if you said you were residing here? But it's a conversation. And I won't say it's always an easy conversation, but, it's something that our principals and counselors and I and Sarah have with people when we have reason to believe that they may not be residing in town. But we do ask for as much proof as we can get.
Thank you.
Yep.
And before you were in this position,
Mm-hmm.
you worked alongside the former administrator. Did you run into any of these cases then, that you had experience in the past with them? Because I just wonder, is there something being different now, done differently, that under your watch that was not in the past, or?
I don't think so. My understanding, I talked to Lou Talarita, who's been doing McKinney-Vento for like 100 years at the state, and what he, impressed to me was that, was that this population has been growing, especially as a lot of the COVID protections, around like utility bills and things like that, as those are waning away, people are struggling more financially. So the state is seeing an increase. And generally, again, the state average is 1%. So at 14, we're pretty close. We were under for a while, but it wasn't a surprise to him that even small towns like ours are seeing that increase. So I don't know if it's necessarily like a difference in policy or fact-finding or process between, Don and myself. I think it's just something that's happening statewide. That was, his understanding of it.
Thank you.
All right. As far as hiring goes, really quick, we are fully hired except for a backup van driver would be a nice to have, but we don't need it right now. So if you know a very part-time backup van driver, we would love to employ them. As far as, curriculum updates and special services, we've really, as I've mentioned a couple times, been working on building communities across building and across disciplines. The first day of that was on the 25th of September. We really had some great, inter-building connections. People gave me really good feedback. They liked the opportunity to network with folks in other buildings, come to some coherence across schools and how we do things. We're going to continue that on the 23rd. We're bringing in an outside consultant with some of our open choice grant funds that we have to do some specific paraprofessional training. Our paraprofessionals gave me some excellent feedback that they just need more support with behaviorally dysregulated students. So we're bringing in some specific training for them. And then one other big kind of curriculum initiative, typically when we had what's called adaptive and augmentative communication evaluation. So that's like a student who would communicate using an iPad that speaks. So you push a button, it says the word. We would typically send those out to other agencies and they would complete the evaluation, they'd send it back. They'd say, you need to get this iPad with this software, we would buy it. Our new SLP, Caitlin Riesberg, is really phenomenal and she has an interest in this area. So we've decided to make the investment to have them in-house. So she will be our district evaluator and she's already started that process. So she'll work across all the buildings. She does the evaluations herself and we will kind of manage that process. So that's another way we're trying to bring savings back to the district. So instead of outsourcing those with a long wait, Caitlin will be our evaluator across the district, and she's been working really hard on kind of operationalizing that. So, all right, last thing, transportation. We're now using the van for some little field trips. across the district, particularly for special education students who might need, a small bus to get from here to there. They need to leave the field trip early. We've been using that, so that's kind of another cost savings that might not be reflected because that would typically come out of like student activities or the building budgets. But we are offering up our van if we can swing it to take those kiddos back and forth. And the feedback we've gotten is it's really, really helpful. It's helping schools go on field trips where it would have been cost prohibitive to get a whole second little minibus for everybody. So that's all I have. If you have any questions on transport and curriculum initiatives, that's all I've got tonight.
I have questions. First, I really, really like this reporting out of how you use the delay day and then what steps are coming out of what staff was reflecting on. So if we continue doing that, I find it very helpful.
Sure. Yeah, I don't want to make a 10-page report, but if this 2-pager is fine, then I'll stick to 2 pages.
I'm curious, does Mary Reddington do like a certification with her training, or is that just?
She doesn't. So she is a outside person that we've used for I think the past 5 years now. She used to do a lot more training in our district, and she was the one that brought like behavior leadership team, a lot of our initiatives that we now can manage on our own. She was a big person that came in and helped build the Bridge program up and the Harbor program. So we really value her expertise, but no, she doesn't have any specific training around it. She does do some trainings that give like continuing ed credits. So for BCBAs, for SLPs, for clinicians and counselors, they can earn CEUs from that, but paraprofessionals don't have like a credentialing, union, so to speak.
Okay. And then, has Caitlin Riceberg done AAC evaluations before?
She has, yeah. In her previous district, she did that quite a lot, and it's a special interest area. So she's really built, what would this look like? What would I need? What would be the form to request it? How would I eval them? How do I work at my schedule? And she's gone to a couple of different professional developments that are on, and it's really nice because those are, again, outside evaluations are a big cost, and also when we don't have our own people do it, sometimes it's hard. We get a report handed to us and we have to operationalize it, versus if we have our in-house people do it, we're able to get something that, speaks our language, so to speak, so.
And it's encouraging to hear that she has experience doing that.
Yes, she does. Yeah, she came to me with that, saying, I really want to do this. I did a lot in my previous district. I see the need. We have more and more students who are kind of limitedly verbal, and she's just been phenomenal at making that happen. Yep.
A question that, I don't recall it being on here previously, but you have, excuse me, for numbers of multilingual students, 65, it's 16 are monitored, and 49 are active.
Yep.
Has there always been 2 numbers associated
There
with that
always have
figure,
been,
but
yep.
you just never saw it before?
Yeah, so the previous number was always just the active. So if you
Right.
just compared, we'd be down from 51 to 49. But just to be clear about kind of the regulations around that, within 4 years of them being English proficient, they have to be monitored by Julie. So I think it's just a number.
That's what it is, so these were individuals mostly who
Yep.
were receiving specialized services, but now
Yes.
may have moved beyond that.
They have, but
it's
she
still
has to
being
monitor
monitored
them.
to
Yep.
ensure that.
Yep. So it's just
And
a
how
little.
does that 16 number kind of figure historically? Is
So
that
it's testing related. She does what's called Lost Links. It's an English proficiency test. It has reading, speaking, writing, listening.
Oh, no, I wasn't asking
Oh,
how
sorry.
they got there. Too intrusive. Just, has there always been a number like that?
Yep.
And we just never had it reported, so 16 isn't like a high number? Or
No,
low
it just
number?
wasn't reported. Again, and I don't have to include it. I just thought it would
I
be
think it's fine.
a data
And
point.
Yeah, when it's something new pops up, I've never seen it before, I'm just curious.
Yeah.
But I think that's, it's a good number to know.
Yeah, I agree. I'm glad you're starting to include that.
The pending identification number, identifying what, 504 plans or placement or
IEPs.
what?
So that is students where we're referring them to see if they're eligible for special education services. So that could be the school team saying, hey, this kiddo's been in reading intervention for 2 years and they're really not improving and we think there might be a disability. So we refer them for testing within our district. It could also be a family that comes forward and says, I really feel my student has a disability, I would like them tested, and then they move through that process. So that's a 45 school day process. So that number always is heavier at certain times of the year. And then, they either go through and they're found eligible and they would move into IEP category, or they'd be found ineligible and then they wouldn't be on the sheet anymore.
When will we have those results to know whether they've moved into certain categories?
Yep, so within the 45 days. So let's say tomorrow, a student was referred for an evaluation. We have federally 45 school days to finish that.
So it's rolling depending on?
It's rolling, yep,
when-
it depends, and parents can request it at any point, school teams request it at any point to seek an evaluation, but it is that 45-day clock, and then within that 45, we complete the evaluations, we determine eligibility at 45 days.
So we probably won't see anything till December?
Depends on the student, yeah, depends on when that clock started, so if you look, like, over the summer, there was 2, so they're probably due relatively soon. Any other questions? No, all right, thank you all.
Questions? Thank you so much, Sarah.
No problem.
Really appreciate your report format. Okay, we're going to move on to new business. The first item is a discussion around a need for an additional paraprofessional at Valley View. Charles, I know you're prepared to talk about this, but I believe also Ryan Wallstrom is with us online.
Is Ryan with us online?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'll start by, I'll let Ryan and Sarah talk about this, but otherwise, I'll just mention to start that we did review this request with the Personnel Committee. Personnel Committee heard it. So this will be for the full board, but we did vet it through the process that we have established, which involves Personnel Committee, then to the full board. So you want to unmute Ryan and let him?
You talk to me. I was going to bring up a question, because the folder for new business is empty. Was that purposeful, or was it just me that didn't get it? Or was there something in that material regarding this? And I know I was on personnel, we talked about it, but.
I don't think I provided you any
I
documentation.
don't think there was any
There was nothing to
documentation.
see.
We're just going to have a conversation about it.
Nothing to see here. Yeah, the folder's supposed to be empty, yeah. Nothing to see here, but something to hear if we can get Ryan unmuted, and otherwise, we'll describe the need and essentially the ask of tonight.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes. Hi, Ryan.
Good evening. Yeah, so I did have a conversation with Charles and with the Personnel Committee regarding this situation. It is a request for an additional paraprofessional at Valley View. And I'll sort of give the short version of it, but I can certainly elaborate if there are questions and you want more information. So we have a kindergarten student that has needs that we were unaware of when we were doing class placement or when Jessica was doing that before she left. He currently, all except for 2 of our paraprofessionals at Valley View are one-on-one paraprofessionals with other students. We have 2 paraprofessionals in the building that are 3-on-1 with students for pretty significant behavioral needs. So there really isn't another person that we can put with this student. We've gone through the PPT and the IEP process, and it was deemed that it is necessary in order to put the behavior improvement plan in place for this student, that he will require a one-on-one. So that's currently in his IEP. We have, fortunately, a paraprofessional who is very skilled, that has been filling the position through Source for Teachers as a substitute. We'd love to move forward, with hiring her, should the board approve the addition of this paraprofessional. But it's certainly IEP driven. It's, as I shared with the Personnel Committee, the only other option we really have at this point would be moving this student into one of the classrooms that has the shared professional. But again, those are already 3 students to 1 adult paraprofessional types of situations. And also, we're now in the middle of October, so obviously moving a kindergarten student at this point in the year would be extremely disruptive.
Why don't we see the 278 number, Sarah, go up to 279 then? Is this a new IEP, right? We have 278 right now, why don't we see?
So the student can have an IEP and not have a paraprofessional. The services are dependent on the student. So you could have an IEP and just have speech 30 minutes a week. You could have an IEP and have a one-to-one paraprofessional and be in the bridge program. So we knew about.
So he's already in
Yep.
that 278?
Yep, he's already there. The new addition to his plan is the paraprofessional.
Very good. Thank you.
No problem.
And I apologize, I may have misspoken there too. Now that I'm thinking about it, the student did come into us with an IEP, but we have changed that IEP, in order to accommodate his behavior plan and some additional services that he has required. It's also a very different situation. A lot of times, and in this situation, students will be in a very small student-to-teacher ratio. In a preschool setting, he was in a full-day program. It was, I believe, 4 students to 1 adult. Obviously, we don't have that ratio in a kindergarten classroom. We're fortunate our kindergarten classes are fairly small, but there's still 16 and 17 students. So this is a very, his needs are very different in this kindergarten situation.
So what would be the impact of the budget? Are we able to afford something like that?
Yes, with some of the savings, so in my report where I said about the $90,000 surplus in 11011, so that includes if we hire this para. So between the new hires, the people that have left, compared to when the budget was started, there has been some savings in that line item that we were able to use.
Ryan, one thing we talked about in personnel a little bit that maybe you just want to speak to for the full board's benefit, just that this child doesn't need a one-on-one. Their IEP and behavior plan call for some adult support, but that this adult might be available to support other students whose needs arise over the next, over the coming weeks and months. Is that true?
That is accurate, Laurel, and I appreciate you bringing that up. So in fact, most of our students at Valley View have one-on-one paraprofessionals in their IEPs. In this situation, at least at this point, we are, this is included in this IEP as a shared paraprofessional, and to your point, Laurel, that paraprofessional can support some other students in that classroom or other needs of our special education students in the school. It's only the middle of October. We've only known this child, for a month and a half, and we're still, figuring out exactly what his needs are and how much time he needs with the paraprofessional. Again, the hope is that it can be shared. It is in his IEP as a shared paraprofessional. We're hoping that multiple students can benefit from the services of this additional person.
Thank you.
Can paraprofessionals be hired per diem or part-time or not committed if we're still in the analysis phase of whether he needs a one-on-one or not? Can we do, typically we bring hire a temp, say. Can we do a temporary?
So we have
like
been.
a monthly basis or anything
If
like
you're,
that?
Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, but you have been using ESS Source for Teachers for a while with this student as sort of that added support, but without having a para, correct?
Our substitute coverage. So
Yeah,
this child had a demonstrated need, and they've been using a substitute to provide extra support. And now with the behavior plan in place, we have an obligation now to provide a para coverage for this child long term.
I thought he already had an IEP.
So there was a change to his IEP and a change to the behavior plan that calls for direct additional adult support.
And if I remember correctly, it was a student who, and Sarah talked a little bit about this, had an IEP for speech and language services, which is typically only, it's a minimal amount of time. Sometimes a half hour a week, sometimes a full hour a week. When you add goals and objectives related to behaviors, and I don't want to go into too much detail because that it is confidential, but it does require far more hours than just supporting a student with speech and language needs. So, and it's very difficult, it's not as simple as saying, we can hire somebody part-time and have them there in the morning or have them there in the afternoon. It's really, supporting this child in all academic areas, for sure. So, that's anything related to reading, writing, and math. There's the new play-based learning initiative. That's a difficult time in his day. So, it's not like we can say, well, he only needs to be supported in the morning or only in the afternoon. There might be pockets of time like lunch and recess, or if it's, whole group instruction where the teacher has, all 16 students, and is directly teaching them versus students working in partners or groups or more independently in centers. That in those unstructured times is really when he needs the support.
Gotcha.
So clearly there's a need, but what's the cost? What is this going to cost us to hire another para?
Whatever their salary would be prorated from the day they would start. But to put into full perspective, we're paying for them right now through ESS. And I think of ESS as substitutes if you're out sick, if you're on vacation, if you have to do a PD, and not to put a position in there and have us pay for it through the subline. You want to be fully transparent and if this person needs an IEP, you want to put a position in there and not blow up the subline.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Consistency.
Yeah.
Right, and it doesn't seem, when everybody comes to me and asks me, should we just hire somebody through ESS? And if it's going to be a permanent person with them, it should not be through our subline. It should be through our salary line.
I agree.
I agree.
And, so it'll be whatever cost, whatever a salary for a para is
So do we
prorated
have a
as to when they would
typical,
start.
just a kind of a ballpark, just so we know that line is going to increase by $70,000?
Oh, no.
We talked about it in personnel.
23,000.
Yeah,
I mean, you
it's
figure with the
only-
rotate, with the prorating, because I think their salaries are about 25 and change. So with the prorated,
benefits or
probably about
whatever.
23,000. And we were, as of when personnel met, we had about 120,000
Okay.
in
I mean, I
that
think
line.
that's
So
the more
then
critical piece of
net that out, and we're
information.
at about the 90.
Right. Okay. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't, because legally we are responsible once that IP is written, so.
And I would rather it be in the proper line and not
Agreed.
in
I
the
agree.
purchase service line.
I agree.
We want to have the highest chance of success. with the
Yeah,
student
absolutely.
getting the
Yes.
exact services that they need designed to.
And consistency.
bring them-
Absolutely.
Well, that's key.
Right.
Good point.
Do you need a
Agreed.
motion?
Oh, yes, please, if you're ready to make it.
I'll make a motion that we hire a para, as described tonight, through, to a permanent para for that child for IEP.
Second.
Seconded by Tim. Any further discussion?
Do we need to delineate that this is a shared para and not a para for a student?
I think we're just, it's the addition of a paraprofessional with Valley View.
To be
Yeah.
utilized.
Right.
Yep.
To be utilized by.
Yeah. Are there any other questions, comments? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I believe motion passes unanimously.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Thank you, Sarah.
And in the future, maybe just because you all set the particulars in a personnel meeting, it's kind of like the first reading of a policy, just bring us the information so that we, this is the recommendation of the personnel committee that we hire the para so that we can, not go through and identify or whatever a child's needs in the
Well, we can
future.
certainly ask
Yeah.
someone from personnel to comment first.
Yeah.
Sure.
As a
Yeah.
way
Yeah.
to bridge
To
that
give an overview?
chasm.
Sure.
Right.
I just, knowing our board, folks will have questions and want to
Yeah.
understand the full
Right.
picture before we vote on
Right.
something, and that's
Right.
fair.
Right.
But yes, absolutely, it did
Yeah.
come with the recommendation
It
of
was the recommendation of the
committee, and
personnel,
we
and
can.
once you guys do that, like we
Good night,
recommend
Stephanie.
Oh, yeah.
policy.
No, I think
Yeah.
that's a good
Yeah.
point. We could
Sure.
Say that.
And then we kind of, keep the confidentiality of the student and.
Yeah, I know our staff is very cognizant of that, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, well, good
Moving on.
conversation, and appreciate the action. The next item is the ratification of the CEA Portland Bargaining Unit Agreement. That's going to be discussed in executive session, so we'll hold on that and go on to old business. We have two Board of Education policies up for a second reading.
Yeah.
The first item is policy 0521, non-discrimination.
If you'll recall, these were just clerical updates, taking out the names of folks who are no longer in those positions and making them more general offices that people can approach if they have questions. Is there a motion to approve policy 0521?
So moved.
Thank you, Tim. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Sarah. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Next policy 4000.1. This is the sexual harassment / Title IX policy, and I'm certain there will be some conversation. Charles, did you want to brief us?
Yeah, well, so just, this is the second read of the policy. We did have some discussion last time about whether the board needs to approve both the policy and the regulation, and you'd asked Laurel and I to go talk to Rebecca, and we were able to do that, and I loop back, it's included in my communications. Her response is that per 9212?
9313.
9313, thank you. Close.
You'll get there.
that you don't. You need that calls for a board to approve the policy, but that the regulation is my prerogative, is the prerogative of your leadership team. Now, in fairness, that hasn't been past practice. Past practice has often been that the regulations accompanying the policy have been included and looked at by the board, and you've approved both. I think that clearly per the policy 9313 was an extra. You didn't necessarily need to do that, but I think that was good new learning for all of us, and why we have Rebecca, and I'm glad that she pointed that out to us. So I think that the ask tonight is that we approve at minimum the policy. Right now, Rebecca's advice contemplates that you would be required to approve regulation if it is mandated by law,
Right.
which in this case, I don't believe it is. I have not read anything in CABE that suggests that in the case of the Title IX, it needs to be, or if I ask you to. And in this case, I'm not asking you to. I think that, I would entertain the discussion about, here at the board level, whether you just want to focus on the policy and ask the policy committee only to bring forward policies and leave the regulations out entirely, or if you'd like to see those regulations too.
My feeling on that, Charles, is that it's good for the board to see the regulations.
Absolutely.
It's good to see what your intention is in implementing the board's policies. And if there's questions or conversation to be had, this is the place to have that.
Right.
But I think it's very clear per our policies that our obligation is to pass sound policies that guide our district, that are in compliance with federal and state law. So I appreciate that our board, and I think we should look at the regulations also and be familiar with it.
And I think if we dig a little deeper into bylaw 9311, what we see in item number 2 is that many different people at different levels will be given opportunities to participate in the development of policies and regulations. So I'm not sure, I just think it's kind of rich and unique that it came up on this issue, and it came up, it seems, particularly because it was Title IX, and there were questions about due process. And it was the first time in my 9 years on the board, it was suggested that we have no role in approving regulations. It is just a matter of course that we always reviewed and we gave feedback in and we approved regulations. I'm a little bit floored by this whole thing that now suddenly that I think it's great that we have the conversation and we kind of air it out, but it's really concerning that it's this particular policy is the reason for that, because I think it's controversial, and I think that there's issues with due process, and the regulation is troublesome. And the policy provides the doorway for that very regulation, where we're allowing for a single investigator model to be used for very serious allegations that could be made against students and against faculty and non-certified individuals as well. Where, and I have here information from this individual, Brett Sokolow, an attorney who's the chair of the National Association of Title IX Administrators, a very prominent individual nationwide, and who said, the single investigator model describes a practice by which a single individual investigates allegations of misconduct, and the same person also makes the final determination of whether a policy was violated. The main criticism of the single investigator approach is that the same person investigates and becomes judge and jury. And he says, goes on to say, I am loath to describe the approach as the single investigator model, as the use of the term model implies it's a valid approach amongst other reasonable models. And I could go on, but it's, you know, it's just really not an appropriate model. It's, you know, professionals in the field feel it's wrong. This, you know, and I don't want to go into the woods here too much, but you know, this whole final rule, 2024, Biden administration, Title IX policy, it's become a political football. It was changed in 2011. It was changed back in 2017. Now it's 2024. 26 states have legal court injunctions limiting them, preventing them from implementing, from taking the very steps that Connecticut is forcing us to take with this August 1st deadline. 26 states have lawsuits they filed where there's court injunctions that say this policy can't be, I'll give you a second, can't be implemented. And I just think, you know, I don't see a recourse here. I just see, for me, I ethically and morally need to just say my piece. And you know, it's going to go forward. You guys will vote for it.
Well, and the interesting thing is, Tim, you point out, final 24, Title IX is for the states who are not involved in lawsuits. So in the states where there are lawsuits, there is no finality to Title IX right now. There's no change to what exists prior, the 2011 or 2017 or whatever it is, with Betsy DeVos making the change, is still you know, active. So that's the confusion.
So I see Sarah's got something to add.
Just for those of us who don't sit on the policy committee, make this probably to your previous point about the personnel committee, can somebody remind us, do we have an existing policy and accompanying regulation?
We do.
Because, Tim, then I'm wondering, like, how has the regulation changed to the single investigator model from something that was different previously?
So that's a great question, and actually that's kind of what I wanted to pose to Charles. My understand, so fill us in about what this regulation would actually change for us, because my understanding is that we've done our best, you've done your best with this regulation to continue the practices that we have had in place that have been working for us within the scope and confines of the policy, the changes to the policy and the law. Do you mind, Sarah, kind of addressing how we've been doing it, and if this represents a significant change or if it doesn't represent a significant change?
And what I do is, well, I'll let Sarah talk about this, because Sarah, one of the first, she had a very busy summer.
Yeah. Right.
One of the most important things that Sarah did this summer, she went to the Shipman and Goodwin training that reflects the final rule. And Tim, I agree with you, we should be calling it something far different than the final rule, because it never seems final, right? We should be calling it the most recent rule, because it changes constantly. So Sarah can give you the specifics about the standards we use in the investigative model, and you know, who has the right to ask for what. Now, Tim, I just want to put everybody's mind at ease about something. In terms of a single investigator model, what makes this, and you'll hear Sarah talk about this, so complicated, is that oftentimes complaints about conduct, especially if it's student-on-student conduct, end up in a complaint either from a parent or a student in a principal or Mr. Cardona, assistant principal's office. They then have to investigate, right? They have to start to figure out, is it mean behavior? Is it something we need to talk to the students about how to be cordial to each other? Does it rise to a level of, is it bullying? Is it harassment, or is it sexual harassment? Like, so they have to go through a very deliberative process of getting as many facts as we can, oftentimes looking at the posts or Snapchats or things or videos or other stuff. I see shaking heads on our students' sides here, like what it was that happened and who's at fault. Now, when it rises to that level of sexual harassment, behavior of quid pro quo or hostile environment of a sexual nature, definitely that's when Sarah is getting involved and having the discussions about whether it's behavior that's, you know, might show up in front of you at some point as an expellable offense, right? Now, that said, that's with the student-to-student level of conduct. If it's a adult, right? I mean, if it becomes an adult on adult or adult on student, or even student on adult level of behavior, we don't have many of those, thank goodness. When we do, I promise you, the first phone call I'm making is to Sarah and to Rebecca, right? So that if it were the serious type of offense that, I'm not gonna say hasn't happened here in Portland, but is rare, thank goodness, but happens, Rebecca is involved and definitely going to be guiding Sarah and me very closely through a process that affords everybody the rights that they're entitled to, that have changed with this new final rule. So Sarah, with that, I teed you up. Why don't you talk about specifically some of those, either the standards with preponderance of evidence or the investigative model that you learned about at Shipman and Goodwin that are reflected in the regulations?
Yep. So a couple of the big changes that are reflected in the policy and the regulations are, one is the expansion of what constitutes sex-based discrimination and sexual harassment. So they did expand that definition a bit more. That's the piece that I believe is being, contested in some different states. So that is one. Another one that I think, Tim, you brought up last meeting for me to look deeper into was kind of when are parents involved in the process. So under the 2020 regulations, districts are required to have a quote-unquote advisor that could be a parent present during questioning, during a fact-finding. Under the 2024, this new one, we're not required to, but you could choose to allow it. And Rebecca, I reached out to her, she clarified that piece, because I know there's a question of, do we have to, do we not have to? It was, an advisor per se in 2020, now that piece is gone. So that's another change.
Right, so students don't need to be afforded the opportunity to have a person present.
If police were involved, then yes, that would activate, but no, so we don't have to allow it.
Later.
Right, so we could choose to allow it or not allow it, and I think that speaks to last time we spoke a bit about kind of that, jurisdiction of a principal around how many folks need to get involved in this and how serious this, and being able to manage things at the building level. So that was one of the other changes. In the policy itself, there was a choice of, the standard of evidence, preponderance of evidence versus clear and convincing, I believe is the exact language of evidence. And there's kind of a choice between those. And then the other choice is between a single investigator model or a non-single investigator model. So we had a choice.
Preponderance, the lower standard.
Yeah, preponderance is, lower standard. And then the single versus multiple investigator model. So those were some of the biggest changes. So I think, what we had discussed was that single investigator model empowers, building leadership a little more to make their judgment. But I will say, they are always checking in with me if we suspect that something might have a Title IX kind of component to it. It doesn't mean that they wouldn't seek other advisors. It just means that they could kind of resolve the matter as a single individual versus bringing in multiple investigators, decision maker, having multiple people kind of in that process.
I apologize. I'm confused because I thought as the Title IX coordinator that you were the investigator.
I wouldn't have to be. It has to be a single investigator.
Oh.
So it could be the principal?
I'd go back to the policy then to see if that's what even the regulation says. That my understanding was the Title IX coordinator.
Yeah, in most cases. So I think I'm misspeaking in a way. So for example, if it's a bullying case that there's a Title IX component or we have a worry, I'd be consulted, but I wouldn't have to make a decision on that case, if that makes sense.
It does, because it wouldn't.
Because it wouldn't be a Title IX investigation.
Your authority as Title IX coordinator,
right.
If it's not a Title IX issue. But once it's identified or an administrator.
Yes, then in that case, yes, I would be single,
deeply
yes.
that it's a Title IX issue, they must, I think the word is shall, in the policy, direct that to you, and that becomes now yours.
Yep, then it becomes my case.
And you are the single investigator for that, unless I'm misunderstanding something here.
No, and you're describing the process, I think, by which our
Right,
administrators
so,
go through the
right.
process, exactly.
Right, well, and that's when the student is placed most at risk, when the stakes are the highest, and that's when their protections are the lowest. And that's my, sorry, go ahead.
No worries, I understand.
Did the policy committee consider offering the student the right to invite another adult, a trusted adult, or is that not allowed in the new? Because that
We
would
don't
respond
give
to
input
one
on
of
regulations any longer, apparently.
We what?
We don't give input on regulations,
that's-
because the regulation is what controls that.
Tim, that's not true. We did have a discussion about the regulation, and that question was
Well, and
raised in
that's
our
what
last
led
meeting,
to
and that's.
us being removed from being the approver of regulations.
There was not an intention to remove anybody from
Okay.
it, my intention is for us to
I'm being
follow
bitter,
our
I
policies.
don't
And
look
to be,
bitter,
and
but I'll
to,
stop.
I understand that, and it's an important conversation. I'm not trying to shut the conversation down, but to be fair, this did come up previously, prior to this policy, where there was sort of a question about, do we as a board approve regulations, because my understanding has always been that the regulation is how it's directly tied, but it is the process by which our CEO implements our policies. So that this has come up before months ago, and I'm glad we revisited it. And it was certainly not intentionally about this policy or to shut down conversation about this regulation. I think this is important conversation. But I guess what I'm trying to understand with the single investigator piece, because my understanding based on conversations at the policy committee, at our policy committee meeting, was that this is a continuation of how things have been handled in the past. So I guess I think the board would like to understand, is that an accurate assessment? This is how we've done things. This is a continuation of how we've done things. It's also in alignment with how we implement our bullying policy. Is that fair? Is that accurate?
Bullying comes under school climate, and Sarah is the school climate coordinator as well, so that puts her.
And I can tell you, and I wish, should invite Dawn back. The entire time I've been your superintendent, and I can't speak for Philip, I've had one adult level incident that involved matters of a Title IX that Dawn investigated with Rebecca, and we handled it.
Right.
I can't remember, I gotta be completely honest with you, specifically all of the steps then but that Rebecca was involved and guiding us, and that guidance reflected the last final rule.
Right.
And we followed all of those steps exactly the way they needed to, and it didn't need to get to a board hearing because
it was handled.
It was handled. It was resolved. If it had ended up in a termination of a contract or a grievance in some way, you wouldn't have known about it until that hearing, because, part of what I need to do is make sure that you are impartial and aware of those things, and Rebecca would then have been guiding you in those discussions. Specifically, though, what changed is reflected in the training you went to this summer that does involve the single investigator model, the standard that is used,
Expansion of the definition.
And the expansion, thank you, and the expansion of the definition. In this case, though, I can't remember specifically whether it was the single or Dawn had Rebecca, and that was sort of the tandem that was happening. And I got to be completely honest, I don't remember whether it was the preponderance of evidence or clear and convincing evidence, but without sharing too much about that incident, it was very clear and convincing in that case.
But I think that you have an opportunity to do either or. If it was more serious and preponderance of evidence is not sufficient, then it would move into another level. So I think we're kind of going around in a circle here, but I also think this regulation is directly tied to the policy with all the forms that you have updated so beautifully, so thank you, I appreciate that. But I think that in this case, we want to make sure that the policy and the definition of how this is going to be implemented are tied together, and I would be supportive of approving both tonight if we can do that. It's complicated, and we have to rely on the people who are going to implement this to be knowledgeable and to have legal advice when necessary. How does that sound? Sound good, Tim?
Not to me.
Okay.
So we're gonna blindly approve it and hope for the best?
No, I don't think we're going to blindly approve it. I mean, the recommendation back 4 weeks ago was rip and replace it because this is the new policy. And we are, now challenging and having a longer discussion so that people have a greater understanding. It does involve students, it does involve certified and non-certified staff, and I would hope that reflects in the policy numbers that we're going to approve tonight as well.
So,
I would like, do you have more to share on you were kind of on a roll, I don't know if you.
I don't know if I was on a roll, but I should.
Because I'm just going.
Slow roll.
A lot of, and I have things I can say too, but I was just curious if you could fill in more blank. I mean, we said that the expanded definition.
Yep.
The lower standard of evidence and the single investigator model were 3 of the changes.
And then the advisor piece. That was the 2020 change as well. So it was mandated in 2020 that students had to have a quote advisor.
Thank you.
Yep, and that's now removed from 2024.
No requirement to provide an advisor, no requirement.
Could we still provide an advisor if we wanted to? Or is the mandate now that we do not?
It's not a mandate that we do not. We could offer it. But I think it sounds like that would be more of a regulation, piece.
But it sounds like it was formally included in the policy.
It was, I think, because it was in alignment with the law.
Absolutely
I'm
Yeah.
just thinking, Tim, to your
Yeah.
point, maybe
Yeah.
that's a way to bridge at least one concern.
Well, that's kind of where I was headed in our meeting, where then it came out that, well, we don't have to approve those regulations, so to me, that kind of shut it down, and now.
But Tim,
misunderstood-
I hope you understand, that was not the intention to shut it down. What I really would hope is that we can have a rich conversation and say to the person who's in charge of implementing our policies, hey, it's important to this board that X, Y, or Z be part of this, and allow Charles to do his work and to make a guidance document that puts that into place. And then at the point that we go to do Charles's evaluation, you know,
Right.
6 months from now or a year from now, that we're reflecting on that, saying, hey, you did a great job implementing the things that were important to this board. Do
Right,
you know-
that's what I contemplate that the bylaw requires, is that, you know, we would be given the opportunity to participate in the development and review
Yeah.
of both policies and regulations, even though the superintendent may choose to say, I don't want you to have to approve it, but you still get input into that. And I don't know under the law whether, and I've done a lot of research, but I haven't gotten that deep, you know, can we just say, yes, well, we're gonna provide the student with an opportunity to have a parent or a representative present if they're being questioned, if they're being exposed to questioning that could result in their expulsion from the school or exposure to law enforcement action against them. I think it's fair that they have a due process right, even though they're minors.
I wonder why they took it out.
So,
Well,
yeah, I mean, I'm
That's a
in,
whole different conversation.
I'm in agreement with you that I think that a student who's being questioned at this level, what I don't want to do is hamstring our administrators to be able to talk to a student to try and get to the bottom of something.
I think it's just a point.
But you made the point earlier that it starts here and then it
Right.
escalates, right? And I think that you're right, that at the point that it becomes a Title IX concern, I would agree with you that I think a minor ought to be able to have a parent present to witness that conversation. I guess, you know, a question to you is, and thank goodness this is few and far between, and this is not a regular occurrence. But can you imagine if we said, Charles, you know, that would make this board more comfortable knowing that was going to be a part of some future investigation at some point, hopefully years and years and years away from now. Can you imagine that would make things harder or make your job impossible, or you know, or is that something that you feel like could be accommodated?
Look,
Maybe we should check with Rebecca.
my answer to that is having been an administrator for a long time and doing these types of investigations and knowing our current building principals and that they are doing investigations all the time
Yeah.
about any number of different things.
But in this specific,
Yeah,
very
correct.
narrow
I-
definition of
I-
a minor who's
I-
being investigated.
Sure, I guarantee that if an administrator is doing an investigation, and Sarah, feel free to disagree with me on this statement, but I'm sure that every administrator, if they were sitting right there, would be nodding their heads. If they were doing an investigation, and that investigation were revealing things about that student's behavior that were serious, drug possession, violence, weapons, sexual harassment, anything that might be getting the administrator to start thinking, ooh, that's a highly suspendable offense
Yeah.
or a potential expellable offense, I guarantee you that administrator is on the phone with mom and dad saying, come on in, we got to have a serious conversation here.
Right.
I need you to start being aware of what those behaviors were and participating in discussions with me as I finish up my investigation and start to make recommendations that involve our Title IX quarter or involve recommendations to the superintendent about the possibility of asking the Board of Education to expel a student. I guarantee that's happening. At some point when that administrator is going, ooh, this is a little bit more than Johnny teased Mary or said something unkind. This was behavior that was, again, violent, drug involved, you know, abusive, sexually harassing, something serious. As a matter of course, that administrator is on the phone with parents or guardians saying, we got an issue here, come on in. So including that as part of a regulation, it's happening naturally.
Right.
There's no way an administrator is getting to the point where they're about to suspend or recommend expulsion to a student and they're not involving a parent.
So I think the caveat that I would give is I would keep the language of advisor, for the reason that sometimes these are like pressing safety concerns, particularly if they verge into Title IX, and I would hate for that to hamstring us, that we can't expedite and keep kids safe if we need to in the moment.
Sure.
Especially at our secondary, social media, like things move really quickly, and the idea of if we're waiting, for a parent to arrive, to be present for questioning, if they're not available that day, they're working, they don't have transportation, if the language of it were parent only or guardian only, I think that might be a little confining as far as investigations go. I would like to note too, though, I think there is one other avenue we haven't talked about. Like we've talked about Title IX as something that always arises between students from like a bullying investigation. There is the option, and I don't think it's ever happened in Portland to my knowledge, but someone could request via one of the forms I sent, you could request, make a Title IX complaint. So a parent, another student, caregiver, someone like that could make a complaint, so that would be another avenue. And I don't know if that is the intent of the single investigator model, is that something is made that is a fraudulent allegation or something that's not well supported, that it allows for that single investigator model versus something coming across as a bullying investigation where we have a lot of information, if that makes sense. But my request would just be that we keep the language as advisor, just to not hamstring the process, especially with student safety.
That makes a lot of sense to me.
And I think to your point, Charles, if offering the student the opportunity to have someone present is absolutely the fact all the time, every time, why would we not want to then simply put it into the regulation? I've written policies and regulations for years. I've been involved with that, and it's normally that's kind of the SOP. That obviously we do that. Well, it's not obvious if it's not documented.
Yeah, and to my point, we say this all the time in policy committee. The best policy are ones that won't require us to change things.
Right.
Right. And I mean, because as I think about it, when we're getting to those points that it's becoming a potential expellable offense, right? Or an offense that might get you fired, right? Likely we're also involved in DCF, kicking in our mandated reporter obligations, or law enforcement.
Right.
And in those cases, I promise you parents are involved, because DCF and law enforcement, they're not going to involve themselves at all until the parents are there.
Right, and that's, again, my point. I was a trained investigator for the state and for disability investigations, and that was the clear standard. That if we were investigating and a person didn't have a representative present, and they started saying things that we understood clearly could expose them to criminal or fireable offenses, we had to stop.
And
say, you know what, you have the right to, have represention, and
100%.
That's the standard. I think a student, especially with students, and you brought this up in the meeting, parent, I forget the local parental
And local
role.
apprentice, yeah.
And it's true, students are under, a tremendous amount of pressure. They have the adult in the room, an administrator, a teacher, somebody who they, respect, and they feel has authority. There should be protections.
Sure, and on the adult side, it would also be, I wouldn't even be talking to that teacher or adult without a union person present.
Sure.
I mean, I'm not even.
Right, they would have, right. they
Right.
would have-
So it sounds like there's no objection to adding that advisor language to the regulation document, and that maybe that would put some minds at ease. Is that a fair assessment?
Oh, okay.
Great. I think
I
that's
thought you were saying it wasn't necessary.
No, I'm saying
No, I think he's saying he has no
part
issue
of
with
current
it.
practice. It's what we do as a matter of
couple
course.
paragraphs if you
Yeah.
can.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great next step with the regulation. My real concern tonight is passing this policy because we have been out of compliance unintentionally with federal law, and we need to bring ourselves into compliance. And so it's important that we pass this policy with the updated language. I think that we can continue to consider that if there, things within the regulation that we want to ask questions about and understand more fully. I think that this change to the advisor language, or the addition of the advisor language, is a really good step. Are there other questions about the policy specifically?
And because this is new, well, it's new, but it's not new, and as you, being new to the process, come back to us and tell us when there's something that's not working. If in the regulation, obviously we can't change the policy, but we can certainly change the regulation as it goes forward.
Yep.
Yeah.
Is there a motion to approve policy 4000.1, sexual harassment / Title IX?
So moved, and with the amended language for the advisor.
Nope,
You
that's,
don't want-
that's separate. That's
you
the
don't want-
regulation. We are
okay,
just looking at the
all right.
policy.
Just the policy, okay.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Sarah. Is there further discussion?
I just, for me, I just want to say I'm opposed to doing this in the absence of understanding how it's going to be implemented and that there will be protections for students. And that's my own.
Yeah, I hear your concern. I would only push back gently that, that in the case of all of our policies, we trust that our superintendent is implementing our policies with fidelity across the district, and that, I think it's good to continue having conversations about how that's happening, and if there are things that we want to make sure are happening. And I do understand your concerns, Tim.
Well, that's my very concern, is that he'll implement it with fidelity that doesn't have students' rights protected,
Yeah.
even though I know verbally it was said that,
Yeah.
that there is consideration for that, but from a written administrative procedure that, and I don't know, because we don't have any involvement with that now, and so I don't know if at some point we get a memo or something that says that you've implemented a regulation, like as a part of this, or like when we vote for this policy, is that regulation now, are you placing that into effect as our administrator, or are you?
Yeah, well, yeah, your whole team is going to be enforced. We currently have a Title IX policy, right? That we are even investigating
Right.
and dealing with now. Likely when, I'll be honest with you, when would you, as a board, most likely find out the specifics of how an investigation was conducted and the evidence that investigation yielded?
At a hearing.
Likely at one of two places. Likely at an expulsion hearing where Rebecca was guiding you through the evidence that was collected, and if it were of a sexual or violent or
Doesn't
drug-related
matter.
or weapon-related,
Yeah.
how your policy that prohibits weapons and drugs and violence in schools was violated and how the evidence was gathered. So you learn both about how the evidence was collected and what the evidence yielded, right? And if it were a sexual harassment issue with a student being expelled for that, you would learn how I implemented the Title IX policy through that vehicle. If it involved a member of our certified or non-certified faculty or staff, that might show up at a hearing where I was asking for the employment and the contract to be altered or
Disciplinary action against an employee.
eliminated, right? And that would be one. So it would be either an expulsion hearing, a disciplinary hearing where you might be entertaining a request to terminate a contract, or a grievance hearing where somebody was grieving a policy, a contract provision, or labor law because they felt like the administrative team had abused their authority or overstepped. So those would be the most likely ways that a board would find out if a superintendent were conducting investigations in a way that didn't match policy or contract provisions or labor law.
Right.
Beyond that, Tim, I can't share with you specific examples of complaints administrators received on a day-to-day, weekly basis, and how, investigations were conducted. I mean, that wouldn't be the board's lane, right? Yeah, I thought you were saying, how would you find out if?
So I guess, think maybe.
How will we?
The regulation, that the advisor part of the regulation is being adhered
Right,
to.
how do we know?
I think we could just ask Charles.
Regulation.
Well, we are. We will continue to look at them, and as if there's a recommended regulation accompanying a policy, if there's a change being proposed, I don't see why we shouldn't look at it and talk about it.
So will this regulation that was attached to this policy that's not on the agenda so today, when this board acts and say it prevails and new policy moves forward, there's no regulation other than what CABE has given. There's an old regulation.
There's
So Charles implements that and that's, I guess, how we find out when, the date you invoke the new regulation.
So
Is it-
Charles has been making, Charles and Sarah working together to amend the regulation to make it work for Portland. And we've asked now to please include the advisor language. So maybe after you all have made those changes, if you could send that back out to the board for us to take a peek at, that would be great.
That would be great.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think that's
'Cause I
a
think
reasonable
maybe
request.
talk about that. Would policy talk about that, or would we wait for another board meeting to talk about
I think if we want to look at it at policy, that's perfectly reasonable
that
to
would
talk
be a
about
great-
it. Yeah.
I think that would be a great way to.
So Tricia, we're going to add to the next policy, policy 3160, and regulation 4000.1A.
And specifically, we'll look at the advisor language. But again, we have a really good track record as a board of not overstepping into, trying to take on the administrative role.
This is sticky.
And this is sticky.
Totally
It's very sticky.
And there's 4 changes, so I know you're mentioning one regulation, but how are those 4 changes that she mentioned being impacted by the regulation as well? I think we're getting stuck on this one point, but what about the others? I don't know enough about the policy to even say whether I approve it now, especially with all this conversation.
The change to the, so this is what we have to be clear about, though. The changes to the policy come to us from the federal government, and it is our obligation as a board to follow the law. So we need to move forward on a policy that puts us in compliance with the law.
But it sounded to me like there were some choices on the policy,
There
how it was being.
are no choices on the policy as it's written right now. But as Tim pointed out, this is a political football.
Yeah.
And some of the safeguards that were removed in 2020 have been restored because there were the rights of somebody who's been discriminated against or been sexually harassed, didn't have the right to face their accusers. There were a bunch of legal things that went on. This has restored some of the safeguards that were removed.
By taking out a
that's
child's
interesting.
ability
Well,
to have
you can look at it to see. I mean,
What
that's-
was that safeguarding?
Well, no, that was the opposite of what happened.
Yeah.
No.
Old,
The-
2011,
Well, I'm talking about 2020, when we approved
Okay,
it in 2020. But
let's-
anyway,
let's-
we'll
let's
talk
rein
about
this
it in
in.
policy, and we'll clarify this.
I've done some work on this, I know.
Okay, well, I have too, so we're
Yeah,
good.
that-
We'll share notes, Tim, I think. That'll be
I
good.
think we can continue to look at and have a conversation about the how it is enforced, but there's been a motion made and seconded about the policy itself, and I would like, unless there's further questions about the policy, I'd like for us to move forward and take action on that. Are there any other questions? No? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, Angela and Tim are opposed. Motion passes. Thank you for a good conversation. Charles and Sarah, it sounds like we'll do some work on the regulation and we can revisit that.
At policy committee, correct.
All right, we're gonna keep it moving. We're gonna move on to committee reports. Curriculum, we meet on the 16th, is that correct?
Yeah.
We meet on the 16th. So we'll have an update next month.
Did I ask about curriculum, since we're talking about curriculum? Just
Sure.
on the, and I'm trying to remember, there was something came up recently, we were talking with Yale.
Mhm.
And I know it's not on the agenda here, but there was discussion that there was a Yale study on ruler. That went to curriculum committee and was approved to go forward.
Mhm.
And I was involved in a discussion in, I guess, policy?
In policy.
Was it policy
Yep.
about that? And yet there's no minutes to curriculum that indicate that there was a discussion about that or what the discussion was.
So
and
there were minutes and.
not available on our website, which is where they would be.
We can ask Tricia about where the curriculum minutes are
In
being.
a drawer there, we keep those things in, you don't let us.
Preparation for my meeting.
It's on the website under subcommittee.
I went to the Board of Education for the Portland School District website, and I went to the meetings and agendas minutes, and I clicked down, and I got to where there's a whole set of minutes and agendas, and it stopped at May 24th, 2024. And
So
there's
maybe it
no-
didn't get uploaded.
No posted there since May 24th that I could see, at least on that day. There were not.
For the subcommittee.
For the curriculum committee, right, for curriculum. And I'd just be curious if we're gonna talk about that at a future meeting, to see what that discussion was and understand
Sure.
if there was material submitted to look at it.
It is in our drive, but I know what you're saying. I saw that same thing. that
Looking in the drive, too.
Public
Oh,
site,
me
it's not
searching on
there.
that drive is a lost cause. I mean, it should be posted to the public.
I mentioned it to you last week, and remember, I said to you, I can't get any of that. I don't see any of those subcommittee meeting minutes, so in preparation
Yeah,
for tomorrow's
send
meeting,
that.
I haven't been able to find anything.
I'm looking at September 10th minutes from the curriculum subcommittee.
Well, if you searched on the drive, maybe,
Yep,
but
that was our
I
last
searched
meeting.
on
On the
the public.
public-facing website,
Yeah.
under
Maybe
Board
they're
of
there now,
Education.
but they
Board
weren't
of
there.
Education Subcommittee, no, it's been there. Well,
Okay, well, we can,
In my computer.
we can take a, it sounds
don't have
like
it on yours.
they're there, okay.
They're there, I see, it's only shared with the people in the curriculum meeting.
You're
in
looking
our
on the
drive.
Google Drives.
In the drive.
Okay, and you're looking on the public board website, and they are there. So it looks like they are where they need to be at this point, but I'm sorry you weren't able to access them sooner. I'm also
they're
happy to
here.
just email them to you.
Well,
But I mean, it looks like they are there. Maybe we need to clean up.
well, it wasn't a hard search, and I'm gonna tell you, I'm looking at it right now, and, subcommittee. Curriculum. May 15th. They're not there.
Through the end of September.
I see curriculum minutes, May 15, 2024, and then I see policy, building, policy, curriculum, policy. Am I,
Okay, so,
if they're not there.
All right.
I resent the
You're-
fact that I'd be accused of it.
no one's
Unless they're
accusing
out
you
of-
of anything, but it
they're
sounds
out of
like,
some order because they
it
don't
sounds
see
like
them.
we'll take a peek at this afterwards and figure out,
Yeah.
we'll figure out what's going on, because I think Sarah sees them.
Come September 27th? No.
I was
All
on my
right.
laptop when we were doing
There are minutes, we want to make sure they are accessible, we will take a look at that. Our next
Yeah,
curriculum
September 10th,
meeting
right?
is tomorrow. Oh, yeah, Charles has got them.
September 10th?
Our next meeting is tomorrow, so there will be fresh minutes to look at soon. Policy.
So
November
does
sorry.
the curriculum, and I'm new to this again, so.
Yep.
Is the curriculum, because it sounds to me like Tim has a question about some curriculum that may have been approved and
No,
not.
there was a presentation at the last curriculum meeting. You remember, Kim talked about it, Kim and I talked about it at 2 board meetings ago when we reported on the curriculum meeting. We talked about the presentation from the folks at Yale who are, Kate Lawson, Principal Kate Lawson is interested in the high school potentially participating in a study that would allow them to
Find it,
utilize
Kim.
this curriculum. So they'd come to talk to the curriculum committee, and then the curriculum committee suggested the next step would be for them to talk to policy regarding our district policy around participating in research studies. And so we'll hear about that shortly. But that was the process, and then the next step would be for it to come to the full board. But so there are minutes, we gotta make sure they're available.
Well, actually, now, they just showed up.
There you go. Yeah, they're here.
I waved my magic gavel, and there they are.
Hallelujah.
I'm glad you can see them. Angela, I do want to make sure that you have access to the curriculum folder. If you haven't had access to that, I'm making a note to make sure that you
I saw what you were
do.
looking at, but I didn't, there were nothing for curriculum. I saw policy, I saw building, I saw.
Curriculum from September 10th were the minutes that I opened that you saw.
Right.
Okay, so we're going to make sure.
And I apologize.
That's okay.
So there was no
I was in the
curriculum
right
minutes between May
But there were no
and
curriculum.
September?
There were no meetings over the summer.
Right.
I believe the June one was canceled because there was
Access wasn't there.
something going on, or not a quorum, not enough of us or something. And then July and August, we were off, and then we met again September 10th. So we will make sure that Angela has access to the curriculum folder. But I believe also Eric usually, Eric usually emails out an agenda for what he's hoping to discuss at our meeting, so I'll probably be sending that out.
seen anything
I
yet.
haven't either, but I'm sure we'll get something. All right, so policy.
November 13th.
But we did have a good meeting
And we did.
last week.
We did,
And
and it was a presentation for a ruler and some additional information, and that presentation will be available at a future board meeting.
I think we have that, Tricia, right? Is it December 10th when we're having that? First
Right.
December. So the folks came to curriculum, presented the curriculum, came to policy.
Right.
So at curriculum, we reviewed the curricular components of it.
actual curriculum
At
part.
policy, we reviewed the components that require board approval before we let an outside organization do research in our schools.
Right, this would be a research project.
On December 10th, those researchers are going to join this meeting at December 10th and present the idea to the full board. And then, you'll be able to
And the
ask
question was going to be
questions.
presented to Rebecca about parental
Approval.
permission
Yeah.
or whatnot. So we'll have an
Opting
answer
in
for
or something.
policy on that.
Yeah, and they'll be speaking to us about, with a whole presentation
Right.
about what the curriculum entails, how the study is run, all of that. But just so the board is aware that this is coming, and this is a request that came to us from Kate Lawson for our consideration.
And
So
I-
it's advancing through the proper channels.
And I did go to a workshop, and I did have a couple of documents that I can send to Charles if he wants to send them out, so people can take a look at Ruler and look at
I can do my own investigation.
Well, this was a workshop that Ruler presented, and it was done
Yeah,
in July.
exactly.
Well,
Yeah.
well, okay.
It's tainted.
Well,
I don't know.
I'd like to
It's
see-
not tainted, it's actually the two
Yeah.
people that we met in policy.
No, I think they're
who
out
did
and
it
proud.
out at
Good time.
Mohegan Sun for
Still,
the Teacher of the Year
No, it's
leadership.
like me trying to sell something to you and
Yeah,
it's
no, I
the way
agree.
I want you to understand it.
Yeah, but I think
A good leader researches it from other avenues as well.
Right. No, that's what I did when we met, and I looked on their website, and I found a lot of information that, I piqued my interest to understand more. That's why I was curious what the presentation was to the curriculum committee, what actually the curriculum
And
committee
you,
approved.
and you have those meeting.
Well, I do now, but I haven't had a chance to read them. But
Sure.
I'll take a look, but I'd be curious if there is information that was
I'll
presented
I'll
at
send you
a
the two
symposium.
workshop.
I'm hungry for that information.
Right.
Because what I see when I look at it, I find some of it very concerning in terms of what we're trying to teach and what we may be trying to teach. And I'd like to understand it better before I form an opinion
I'll
about
forward it to Charles, and he can send it out to everybody.
All right.
So you take a look at it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so that was our policy meeting. Personnel, we met, I can't remember, it was last week, yeah. I believe we reported that we,
Around the paraprofessional edition.
yes, we met around the paraprofessional edition, and our previous meeting, which I can't remember whether it got reported or not, we met to begin discussions around negotiations with our administrative assistant unit. And that's, I think, the long and the short of that. Yep. All right, buildings and grounds,
No meeting scheduled.
CREC,
Tomorrow at 11:30.
Board of Selectmen,
I didn't make the last meeting, but the agenda looked very light. So I think there was nothing significant.
Youth
I watched it online, it was very light. Short and sweet.
Youth Services Advisory,
No meeting now until January, and the committee will be focused on Halloween and on the tree lighting.
Great. Equity and Inclusion Coalition, you all reported last time, so I bet you haven't met again.
We have that.
Okay. Audience of Citizens, do we have?
But Eric did send out a PowerPoint, I
Yep.
saw that.
Was it a month?
The monthly, the October monthly,
Equity and inclusion newsletter.
yeah, that's always got lots of good resources in it. Audience of Citizens, don't believe we have anyone in person. Is there anyone online who wishes to address the board?
No one has messaged yet, but if we give it a second for the audio to carry through.
Sure.
All right.
I think everybody's good so far.
Okay. Let's move on to Board of Education member comments. Dave, let me start with you tonight.
I'm good.
Good? Sarah?
Just additional appreciation for the parents and educators and students who came out and spoke tonight about the Bridge program. It takes a lot of courage to get up and
Yeah.
share that.
Yes, it does.
Thank you to all of you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it because I didn't know much about it, so it was good to hear directly from the students as well as their parents.
Yeah.
That was really neat. Thank
Thought
you.
so, too.
for- I don't know who's setting these up, but I really appreciate, it's good stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I know, I really
Really
enjoy
helping
those
me
spotlights
to
too.
Get a well-rounded appreciation for all the different programs,
Yeah.
not only in special ed, but music last week or
Mhm.
2 weeks ago. That was very good as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Agreed. Why don't I start down here, Caitlin?
I echo everything about the bridge program. I think it was very awe-inspiring. It was wonderful to hear from all the parents as well as the students. But I think it's something that we should put out more since it's been so successful. We should promote it maybe. But just coming from me. Inspiring.
Yeah, thank you. Liam, anything?
I would agree. Again, it's truly incredible the work they're doing with this Bridges program. Hope to hear more from them. That's
Great.
all.
Thank you. Tim?
I haven't said enough yet.
Hey. The floor is
I will
yours.
say, I really truly appreciate that the Bridges program presentation, that was cool to hear, so.
Great.
That's fine.
Great.
Ditto on the Bridges program. Super heartwarming to hear those success stories.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would say the same. Tomorrow, Teacher of the Year is going to be announced, so we'll know who the Teacher of the Year is in the state of Connecticut.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting. And I think the Bridges, I mean, it's about modulating your responses, it's social emotional learning, and I think that's truly a remarkable thing that has happened with the young people that are in that program.
Yeah, agreed. All right. I don't have anything else to add. Is there
Yes.
Motion to enter executive session for the purpose of CEA Portland Bargaining Unit Agreement and to invite Dr. Britton to join us?
So moved.
Thank you, Meg. Is there a second? Seconded by Tim. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm marking at 9:20.
I'm gonna run to the
Now,
bathroom.
we're gonna go into that room again so they can get us set up here and
Okay.
Oh, no.